I've been trying to start this for 3 days now. I sit down, I look at the wall, I think about what I want to say and how to say it, and then I get up and do something else. Water the plant on the windowsill. It's probably getting too much water by now. Make another cup of tea I don't finish. But today, I'm going to say it, even if it doesn't come out right. My name is George Hadley. I'm 81 years old, and I have spent the better part of this past year trying to answer a question that sounds simple but isn't. What was I waiting for? Not in a specific sense. I'm not talking about one thing I delayed or one decision I put off. I'm talking about something larger than that. Something that runs underneath the whole of my life, like a current I could feel but never quite name. I was always waiting for the right time, for things to settle, for some version of my life that felt complete enough to actually live inside. I'm 81 now. I'm still waiting, and I don't think the thing I was waiting for was ever coming. I grew up in a family that was careful. That's the word I'd use, careful. My father was careful with money, careful with words, careful with emotions. He was not a cold man, I want to be fair to him, but he was a man who believed that patience was the same thing as wisdom, that if you waited long enough, the right answer would present itself, that rushing was a form of arrogance. I absorbed that, more than I knew, more than I would have admitted for most of my life. My mother was different. She was quick to laugh, quick to decide, quick to move through a room like she'd already been there and knew where everything was. She used to say my father was still thinking about breakfast while she was already planning dinner. She said it with affection, mostly, sometimes with something else underneath. I met my wife Eleanor in 1967. We were both 24. She was working at a library, not as a librarian, just part-time at the front desk, while she figured out what she wanted to do next. I came in looking for a book I can't even remember now, and she found it in about 45 seconds and handed it to me and went back to what she was doing. No small talk, no performance. I came back the following week, and the week after that, for a book each time. Books I chose specifically because they would require me to go to the desk and ask. It took me 6 weeks to ask her to dinner. 6 weeks. Eleanor told me later that she'd been waiting since week 2. That is a very Eleanor thing to say, and a very George thing to have taken 6 weeks. We married in 1969. Good years followed. Not perfect, nothing is perfect, but good. Eleanor taught school, I worked in municipal planning, which sounds dull and mostly was, but I was good at it, and it was steady, and steady felt right to me for a long time. We had 2 daughters, Patricia in 1971, Lorraine in 1974. Life was full in the ordinary way that life gets full. School plays and grocery runs, and the particular exhaustion of raising children while holding down jobs, which is a different kind of tired than any other kind. I was present, I want to say that. I was there. I was not an absent father. But there's a difference between being present and being, I don't know the exact word, open, maybe, fully open, available in the way that some people are, where you feel them in a room, where you feel like they're actually there with you rather than managing their participation from a slight distance. I was there, but I was always slightly at a distance, even from myself. There's a memory I keep coming back to. 1983. Patricia was 12. It was a Saturday morning, and she came downstairs while I was reading the newspaper. I still read actual newspapers then. And she said, "Dad, do you want to go to the park?" Just like that, uncomplicated. 12 years old and wanting her father to go to the park with her. And I said, I remember this clearly, I said, maybe after lunch, let me just finish this. She said, okay. She went back upstairs. After lunch, I fell asleep in the chair, and when I woke up, it was mid-afternoon, and Patricia was in her room listening to music, and the moment was gone. We never went to the park that day. I never thought about it again until last year. Last year, it came back to me at 2 in the morning, and it sat on my chest like a stone. Not because it's the worst thing I've ever done, it's not. It's a small thing, objectively, a forgettable Saturday. But it's not forgettable, because it wasn't one Saturday, it was a pattern, a posture to life that said, not now, later, after, when things are more settled, when I've finished this, when I'm more ready. Maybe after lunch. That was me. That was the whole of me for years. Eleanor used to plan things, trips mostly. She'd find a place she wanted us to go, nothing extravagant, she wasn't like that, just a town she'd read about or a park she'd seen in a magazine. And she'd bring it up, and I'd say something like, that sounds nice, let's look into it. And then I wouldn't look into it. And she'd bring it up again a few months later, and I'd say the same thing. We did take trips, I don't want to make it sound like we didn't, but there were more trips that lived in Eleanor's mind than ever happened in our lives. More ordinary weekends she imagined us having. More ordinary adventures she wanted and asked for and eventually stopped asking for. I know when she stopped asking. It was gradual, and then it was just the new normal, and I accepted the new normal without ever asking myself what it had replaced. Patricia lives in Oregon now. We talk every couple of weeks. She's good. Her life is good. She married someone I like, has a son who is 15, and apparently very into music, which makes me think of Eleanor, who was also very into music, in a way I never quite kept up with. Lorraine is closer. She's in the same state, 2 hours away. She visits more. I have a relationship with both of my daughters, but I've been thinking about whether that's the same as knowing them, whether I know who they are the way you know someone you've actually been curious about, asked questions of, sat with without an agenda. I think I love them the way my father loved me, completely and from a slight distance, and I think they feel that. I think children always feel that. Eleanor got sick in 2015. Nothing sudden, a slow thing, the kind of illness that gives you time, which sounds like a mercy and is in some ways, but is also its own particular difficulty. Time means you see it coming. Time means you make adjustments. Time means you watch someone you've spent most of your life beside become gradually less themselves, and you try to stay present for it, and some days you do, and some days you go into the other room and stare at nothing for 20 minutes because you don't know where else to put it. She died in March 2018, Thursday, a damp day. I was there. I held her hand. In the last year of her life, Eleanor and I talked more than we had in years, maybe decades. Not because of any great decision on my part. I think it was just proximity and time and the particular honesty that comes when there isn't much left to waste it on. She told me things I didn't know. Not big revelations, not secrets, just things. That she had always wanted to live closer to water. That she had wanted to write something, a book, or maybe just essays, but had never felt like her time was entirely her own. That the happiest she remembered being was a trip we took to Vermont in 1988 that I barely remember, and she remembered in specific detail. The name of the inn, what we ate for breakfast, the way the light looked in the morning. I listened. For the first time in a long time, I actually listened. And I thought, why did it take this? Why did we need the illness and the closeness of the end to have the conversations we could have been having for 40 years? I didn't say that out loud. I just held her hand and listened. After she died, the house was very quiet. I knew it would be quiet. I expected quiet. But I didn't expect the quality of it, the specific texture of a house that has been lived in by two people and is now lived in by one. The way her absence was present in every room. Not haunting, I don't mean it that way, just present. The chair she sat in, the books on her side of the bed, the coffee mug she used that I washed and dried and put back in the cabinet and haven't used since. It's still there, third shelf, left side. I started going for walks, long ones, longer than I'd ever walked when there was somewhere I needed to be. I'd go out after breakfast and just walk through the neighborhood without a destination, which is something I had almost never done in my life. And what I noticed, walking like that, was how many things I'd walked past for years without seeing. A garden someone kept on a corner lot that was genuinely beautiful. A house with a painted door, deep red, a very specific shade, that I must have driven past 500 times without registering. A bench by a small pond 2 streets over that I didn't even know was there. 2 streets over, after 40 years in this neighborhood. I started sitting on that bench, most mornings, just sitting, watching the water, which doesn't do much, but it doesn't need to. A few ducks. Some mornings a heron stands on the far bank and I watch it for a long time because it's very still and there's something in its stillness that I recognize. And it was on that bench, one morning last spring, that the question came to me. Not dramatically, not like a revelation, just quietly, the way thoughts come when you're finally still enough to hear them. What were you waiting for, George? I sat with that for a long time. The ducks moved across the water, the heron stood very still, and I couldn't answer it. That's what frightened me, not that I had waited, I knew I had waited, but that I didn't know what I'd been waiting for. There was no specific thing, no clear condition I'd been holding out for, after which real life would begin. I had just been suspended, careful, managing, waiting for something I never defined. I think about Eleanor bringing up those trips, all those places she wanted us to go. And I think the honest answer to why we didn't go is not that I was too busy, or that money was tight, or that the timing wasn't right. The honest answer is that I was always slightly more comfortable with the idea of something than with the reality of it. The idea of a trip felt fine, safe, something to look forward to in theory. The actual trip required decision and commitment and presence. And something in me, something I carried from my father and maybe he carried from his, resisted that, preferred the open door of possibility to the closed door of a thing actually done. Because once you do the thing, it becomes the past, and the past is fixed. And I think I found that frightening. Patricia called me on my birthday last year. She's a good daughter. She always calls on my birthday. We talked for a while about ordinary things, and at the end, before we hung up, she said something that she said casually, like it was nothing. She said, "I wish I knew what was going on in your head sometimes, Dad." And then she laughed a little, like it was a small complaint, not a serious one. And I said, "I'm pretty boring in here." She laughed again. We said goodbye. I sat for a long time after, because the truth I didn't say, is that I don't know what goes on in my head either. I have lived inside myself for 81 years, and I am still somewhat unknown to myself. And if I am unknown to myself, I was certainly unknown to her, and to Lorraine, and to Eleanor, who deserved better than that. I'm not someone who regrets easily. I want to say that because I don't want this to sound like a man drowning in self-pity. I don't think I am.
I think I've had a life, a real one, with love in it and good work, and moments I wouldn't trade. But there is a difference between a life lived and a life entered. And I think I stood at the entrance of my own life for a very long time, careful, patient, waiting for the conditions to be right. My father died at 73, heart failure, quick at the end. He was a man who believed in patience, who believed in waiting, who thought the right answer always came if you were still enough to let it arrive. I don't know if the right answer ever arrived for him. I never asked. Another question I didn't ask while there was still time to ask it. I'm going to say something now that I've never said to anyone. There was a point, I was in my mid-40s, so sometime in the late 80s, when I had a feeling, not a crisis, not a breakdown, just a feeling that came one evening when I was doing something completely ordinary. Washing dishes, I think. Eleanor was in the other room. The girls were upstairs. The feeling was this: I am actually not here. Not in a frightening way, just observational, like I had noticed for a moment that I was moving through my life without being fully in it, that I was watching it from just behind myself. I felt it clearly. And then I finished the dishes and dried my hands and went into the other room with Eleanor, and I never thought about it again for 30 years. 30 years! I just put it away, filed it somewhere, let the ordinary motion of the next day carry me forward. That's what I was best at. The forward motion, the management of each day. Not the being there, just the moving through. Eleanor knew. I think she always knew. She didn't talk about it directly. That wasn't her way with me. She'd learned over the years what I could receive and what I couldn't. But there were moments, small things, she said. Once, maybe 1995 or 1996, she looked at me across the dinner table and said completely out of nowhere, "George, are you happy?" Just like that, out of nowhere. And I said, "Yes, of course, why?" And she said, "I just wondered." And we moved on. But I've thought about that question for years now, the way she asked it, the look on her face. Not accusatory, not even sad, just genuinely wondering, genuinely not sure. The woman who knew me better than anyone on earth looked across the dinner table and wasn't sure if I was happy. And I said, yes, of course, and changed the subject. Was I happy? I've been asking myself that on the bench by the pond. I think the answer is, I was fine. I was content in the way that careful people are content. Nothing was acutely wrong. I had what I was supposed to have. But there's a kind of happiness that is the absence of unhappiness, and then there's something else, something active, present, chosen, something that requires you to be actually there in your life, wanting it. I think I had the first kind. For a long time, I thought they were the same thing. My grandson, Patricia's boy, his name is Owen. He's 15, very into music, as I said. When he visits, not often, Oregon is far, he brings his guitar and he plays in the evenings, just for himself, not performing. He sits in the corner of the living room and plays and doesn't care if anyone is listening. I sit and listen. He has no idea how much I look forward to it. And I haven't told him. I keep meaning to tell him. There it is again, meaning to. I'm going to tell him next time, I've decided that. Not because it will change anything, not because it's wise or important, just because he should know that an old man sits in his armchair and listens, and it is the best part of any week that Owen is here. He should know that. People should know when they are the best part of someone's week. I didn't understand that for most of my life. I'm 81 years old. I sit on a bench by a pond most mornings. I watch a heron stand completely still on the far bank, and I think about Eleanor, and I think about Patricia in Oregon, and the park I never took her to, and I think about all the trips that lived in Eleanor's imagination and not in our lives. And I still can't tell you what I was waiting for. I've looked for it honestly. I've sat with the question long enough to know it's not a simple one. I think maybe I was waiting to feel ready. Ready for what exactly, I'm not sure. Maybe ready to be fully inside my own life without the distance, without the glass between me and everything else. That readiness never came, and I've started to think it was never going to come on its own. The readiness was never going to arrive and announce itself. It was something you had to decide, and I kept waiting to feel it instead of choosing it. And now I'm 81, and Eleanor is gone, and Patricia is in Oregon, and there is a bench by a pond, and a heron, and Owen's guitar on the evenings he visits, and I am finally trying to be here for all of it. If you're sitting somewhere right now, listening to this, I don't know what you're waiting for either. Maybe you don't know yet. Maybe that's worth sitting with. Not to panic, not to make a list of things to change, just to sit with. And if something in here felt familiar, if you recognized something in yourself that I recognized in myself too late, then maybe leave a word in the comments. You don't have to explain it. Sometimes it's enough just to know someone else felt it too.